What's up, Star Wars nerds, and welcome to another episode of Brett on Fett. On today's episode, we'll talk about the new Ewing vehicle reveal for the Vintage Collection and the pack-in figure dilemma for TVC vehicles. Plus, I've got the Chewbacca and electronic C-3P0 from the Saga collection to review, and I got some pickups. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 87 of Brett on Fett, and recently I've been wanting to fill out the scenes for my various playsets, including the carbonfreezingchamber from The Empire Strikes Back, and so I picked up a Chewbacca with the C-3PO in a bag, and I want to review that for you guys. I've also got a couple of interesting pickups as well, but before we get into any of that, I want to talk about the recent reveal of the Ewing for the Vintage Collection. A fantastic looking vehicle, and it is confirmed that it will come with a carded figure of the droid for that ship, but the pilot will be sold separately. And this got me thinking about the whole dilemma with including figures with vehicles, carded or loose, exclusive, not exclusive. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that in addition to my reaction on the vehicle itself. So let's take a look. Alright, so by now you've probably already seen the promo images for the new Ewing that Hasbro revealed this past week. By the way, pre-orders are underway currently, and the pre-order window closes on the 5th of March 2024. So they're doing the same thing they did with the recent Sabine and Chopper 2-pack. There's a pre-order window, and as long as you order within that window, you are guaranteed to get the product. So it's not going to sell out. My understanding is they will also make the Ewing available on Shop Disney and at the Disney parks later on, but I think stock will be limited for those, and so if you want to guarantee that you get one, I think it's probably best that you go ahead and pre-order it through hasbropulse. Now, I'm here to tell you I am very excited about this release. The Ewing was one of my top TVC wishlist vehicles ever since I saw it in Ahsoka with Sabine racing down on her speeder. I was like, that will make an awesome vehicle for TVC. And so very happy to see this, and it looks great. My only minor concern on how this vehicle looks, and I think only one Kenobi had the same concern on his channel, in that it looks like it might be a little too clean and there doesn't appear to be much weathering at all. So I'm hoping the final product will throw in just a little bit of weathering. They don't need to overdo it, just some slight weathering to give it that more realistic look. But the other thing I was very excited about with this release is that it's coming with that awesome droid we saw from Ahsoka. Apparently this droid's name is KE4N4, and he looks great. He's got that awesome throwback to the original Kenner R2-D2 with those teardrop patterns on the dome. I love his big eye in the center. Just looks fantastic. So very excited that he is being included with the vehicle, and it has been confirmed that this droid will be carded when he is included with the Ewing purchase. And then Kenner revealed that they are pipelining the pilot for the Ewing, Lieutenant Callahan, as a separate carded release. And this is very interesting to me because it's the opposite of what they did for the Antok Merrick X-Wing. On that release, they included the pilot as the carded figure inside the box, and then later released a separate carded figure for his droid that goes with that X-Wing. And unfortunately took way too long, in my opinion, to release that droid. And with that Antok Merrick X-Wing release came a lot of complaints, particularly from carded figure collectors, either because they didn't like that this figure was locked behind the purchase of this vehicle if they're not interested in the vehicle itself, or if they get the vehicle, they wanted to have a loose pilot to go with the vehicle, but then would have to take the figure off the card. And so if they wanted both a carded version and a loose version for the vehicle, they would have to buy two of these vehicles, which is rather expensive, or find the carded figure on eBay and pay expensive third-party prices. And so herein lies the dilemma with figure pack-ins for vehicle releases. I think most of TVC collectors would agree that vehicles are a really good thing for TVC TVC is the world building line, and you need vehicles and play sets to build worlds. And so I think we would all agree they're a good thing, but we may not all agree on how Hasbro should go about including the figures that drive these vehicles with the release. And so I wanted to take a minute to go through some of the vehicle releases that Hasbro put out the last few years and how they handled the figures that go with those vehicles. Now, for the purposes of this video and to keep things simple, I'm only talking about vehicle releases and not play sets, because to me with play sets you can populate those with a variety of characters, versus with vehicles you're going to first and foremost want the character that operates that vehicle. Alright, so we've already talked about how Hasbro handled the Antok Merrick X-Wing fighter release. Let's look at the AT-ST Raider. This one came out a few years ago, and by the way, Hasbro is reissuing it with pre-orders underway currently. And the way they handled this one is they included a loose figure of the Klatooinian Raider, and then later, much later unfortunately, they released the same figure on card, and he turned out to be a really awesome release in my opinion, because I got to get this awesome card back, one of my favorites from last year. And so that was an interesting way to go about it. I think had they not taken so long to get this Klatooinian Raider out on a separate card, that this would probably be the best way to go about it. But more on that later. Let's look at some other product releases. This of course is the AT-ST from Return of the Jedi. And on this one, it came again with a loose figure, but they came with a Chewbacca rather than the AT-ST Driver, since those had been released previously. And the biggest complaint I recall hearing from this release is that they did not include the Chewbacca on a card in that classic Return of the Jedi Chewbacca card that the Black Series got for their 40th anniversary release. And so this was another interesting way Hasbro went about it, including a loose figure only, not a carded version, and that of a character that wasn't the primary operator of the vehicle. But in this case, the AT-ST drivers were already available as separate releases, and at the time this vehicle came out, you could still easily find them at retail price. And who knows, maybe someday Hasbro will reissue that Chewbacca on a card back in the future. And another vehicle release, there was actually two of them, was the speeder bikes. You had the Return of the Jedi version and the Mandalorian version. What you're looking at now, of course, is the Mandalorian version, which came with the Remnant Scout Trooper and Grogu in the satchel. Now for these releases, of course, Hasbro chose to include the Scout Trooper on a card. But with the speeder bike releases, I think there was a lot less controversy over the pack-ins, because the carded figures were locked behind products that were much less expensive, so easier to get. Plus, I think a lot of people like me wanted to pick up a couple to put a different character on the speeder bike. So it actually worked out perfectly, at least in my case. For example, here, where I wanted to put IG-11 on one of the speeder bikes, so I was able to keep that other Scout Trooper carded. So for these smaller vehicle packages, I think most people are okay with the carded figure included with the vehicle and not available as a separate release. And yet another way Hasbro has gone about this is with the Mandalorian N1 Starfighter. Awesome vehicle, one of my favorite TVC vehicles of all time. And of course, with this one, it came with a packed-in Mando figure that was on an exclusive card back. And so me as a carded collector, I had to keep that one on card. And so in this case, I just used the original Beskar Mando figure to pilot it, where you had to take off this soft rubber plastic cape to fit him in the Starfighter, which was not ideal. And I really wanted that nice definitive version of Mando with the soft goods cape loose to go with that N1 Starfighter. So recently Hasbro revealed that they are re-releasing that figure on a card back as a separate release, but the way they're handling this is they're putting that reissue of that same Mando figure on a different card back to keep that card back exclusive to the N1 Starfighter release. And so we've seen Hasbro handle this in a variety of ways, and with this recent reveal of the Ewing coming with a carded droid and then a separate carded release for the pilot, it got me thinking about what is really the best way to go about this, which way would most collectors prefer, and possibly which way would be the best decision for Hasbro as a business to sell the most product and make the most profit. So yesterday I put out a small poll on my YouTube channel community tab where I asked, how would you prefer Hasbro to handle figures that go with a specific vehicle release in TVC? And the choices I gave was a carded figure pack-in with the vehicle only, a loose figure pack-in with the vehicle only, a carded figure pack-in plus a separate carded release, and finally a loose figure pack-in plus a separate carded release. Now I do regret not including a fifth option of the vehicle only with no figure pack-in. I'm curious to see if anyone would have gone for that, because that is how Hasbro handled the majority of TVC vehicle releases in the past. The vehicle purchase was by itself, which would of course would help bring down the sales price, and then you had to go get the pilot as a separate carded release elsewhere. So I'm curious to see how people think about that option, but I think I left it out of the poll because the trend seems to be with Hasbro to go the way of figure pack-ins and not vehicle only releases. But if you think you'd like for Hasbro to go back to that, let me know in the comments. Now at the time I'm recording this video, which is only a day after posting the poll, I'm only getting a very small sample size of just 46 votes. But with those 46 votes, there is a clear leader at the moment, and that is for Hasbro to include the figure loose with the vehicle packaging and then do a separate carded release of that same figure for people who want to get that figure on card. And I tend to agree with this option. By including just a loose version of the figure with the vehicle, you could potentially bring down that price point for the vehicle package and possibly boost your sales. And then for carded collectors, they don't have to worry about taking it off the card. It's already off the card. They can put it with the vehicle, and then they can go buy the carded version separately. So I really like the flexibility of this option and the potential for a lower price point. Now I want to share with you a couple of interesting comments I received from you guys on the topic. The first being from Florida Keys Pirate on YouTube. The comment is, carded figure with exclusive card back and a loose figure to display with the vehicle. I don't want to have to choose carded or loose or buy two just to have both options. And I totally get this, Florida Keys Pirate. That would be my favorite option as well. It would be perfect for someone like me that likes to display figures and vehicles loose, but also wants those figures on card to display as well. This would be perfect for me. Unfortunately, I just don't see Hasbro ever doing this. I think it will not be cost effective enough for them, and it will drive the price point up to a point that could hurt the sales. That's just my opinion. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see it happening. Then I got this comment coming at a different angle. This is from Ambitious Lom Series Droid on Instagram, and he put, carded figure pack-in vehicle only. These high-priced items need the added value. Sales will dip if you remove the exclusivity of the figure. So this is also a very interesting point, and the take here is that the exclusive figure packed in with the vehicle is driving or at least boosting the sales of that vehicle, and that could be correct. I really have no idea what percentage of these sales are made because people want the figure. I don't know how many carded figure collectors out there are going out and buying vehicles just to get the carded figure and then, maybe selling off the vehicle itself on eBay. I know that happens, I just don't know how often that happens. Now, although this person did not agree with me, one method that could possibly help with this concern is for Hasbro to handle it like they did with the N1 Starfighter and have an exclusive card back version of that figure packed in with the vehicle, but then also release the same exact figure on a different card back separately. But either way, I think the exclusivity factor driving sales is a valid point and one to be considered, making this dilemma even more complicated. Only time will tell if Hasbro decides to reissue the KE4 droid on a separate carded release, and if they do that, will it be a different card back? We'll just have to wait and see. Me personally, I'm hoping they reissue that because I definitely want to have this droid out of the packaging in the vehicle once I get it, but I really want him on card back as well. But let me know what you guys think Hasbro will do with this situation and what you would prefer. Alright, next I want to switch gears to some pickups, starting with this awesome gift I randomly received from my friend John, the action figure grader on YouTube. Not only is he a collector of graded figures, but he's also a big-time collector of graded comics, and he gifted me this Mandalorian #1 with the alternate cover art by John Taylor Christopher. Perfect for a figure collector like me. I love the three-dimensional look of the art from JTC. And so this is an awesome addition to my Star Wars collection. Now, I don't really collect comics, but I do enjoy them, and so this might lead to a couple of purchases. We'll see. But thanks a lot, John. I really appreciate it. This community is awesome. Next up, I added another addition to my Vintage Kenner Mint on Card collection with the At8 Driver. Now, you may recall I picked up the At8 Commander a while back, so I had to get the driver to go with him. And I just love the At8 Driver card back. It's just a really sweet image of that awesome helmet. And so I found a good deal on one through Action Figure Grader. It's what I would call a budget one, budget-friendly card back, because it does have a few issues. Namely, it's got a dent on the top of the bubble. Aside from that, it's got some minor edge wear and a few minor creasing, like at the corners. But overall, it displays very nicely. You can see it is a 41 back, and I love the backs of the 41s because of the Hoth stuff that's on there on the bottom. It's so cool. And so it just looks great. It displays good, and it wasn't too expensive. So very happy to add this one to my collection. And finally, I've been wanting to complete the scenes for some of these playsets I have, including the carbonfreezingchamber. And I realized I did not have a Chewbacca with the detached limbs C-3PO in the bag. And so I picked up this Chewbacca with electronic C-3PO for the Saga collection. I got it for very cheap. I think I paid $16 or something like that for it. And I thought maybe I could just do an unboxing, a little mini review for you guys. And when I got it in hand, I soon realized this is simply a straight repack of the 2002 Saga version, which ironically I once owned. I once had a ton of those 2002 blue carded Saga series figures, but purged all of them except for a Bobafett once I started getting into the vintage collection. So kind of wish I had hung on to that Chewbacca. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at the outer packaging. So you've got the image there of Chewie with 3PO on his back. You see it's number 54 in the collection. There's a look at 3PO and Chewie and the net with some kind of glowing background. Looks like the carbon freezing chamber. You see it says episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and 1 battery included. We'll find out later if that battery is still operable or not. And flipping over to the back, you can see it's got a description for Chewie. There's an image of the figure itself, and then it came with this little hologram figure that these all came with. This one is Queen Amidala, and there's a look at the rest of the wave. So there's a look at the packaging. This one's in really good shape. Kind of a shame I'm going to have to open it, but that's what I got it for. Alright, so here is all of the contents laid out from the box, starting with the little hologram Queen Amidala. We'll cast that aside, but those are always a nice little fun bonus. Here is the net, and it seems pretty solid. It's got a little drawstring to open and close it. There is a look at the 3PO head sculpt. Nice. It's got some little weathering, and they painted the little wires there coming out of his neck area. And here is a look at his torso. Now, this is where the electronic components would be. I really like the paint apps on this one. I think they did a pretty good job with the weathering and everything, and there's kind of where it'll light up, I assume. Here is the rest of his parts. Now, it's kind of funny. I was a little bit surprised this is all one mold. It kind of makes sense, but for some reason I thought this might actually be separate parts, just kind of grouped together that you would throw in the bag. But they decided to just do this one unique mold. So it's kind of interesting. It makes sense. It'll probably actually be easier to just put it in the bag, because that's the point of this whole thing. And there is the E11 blaster that Chewie uses, I guess, in the Bespin escape. Pretty dull, but at least it's not gummy like some of the new weapons we get today. Before we look at Chewbacca, I want to take a look at how the electronics on 3PO work. Now, you insert the head there, and once you press it in, it does light up. Now, the batteries are a little bit low, but they're still working. You can't see it, but his eyes do light up, but it just doesn't feel quite right. You have to push the neck in pretty firmly to get the light to light up, and so the head just does not stay secured to the body. And they did it that way because I guess if you secured it, it would just light up constantly and the batteries would just die really fast. But they really should have done a button to activate the electronics and not relied on you connecting the head to the body to light it up. I kind of get what they were going for with that play feature, but it's just so annoying. I'm sitting here trying to play around with it to get the head to connect to the body and stay, and it just won't. So that's kind of a disappointment and is going to possibly be a problem with displaying the figure properly. So not at all happy about that, but it is what it is. So let's go ahead and put 3PO down and take a closer look at the Chewbacca figure itself. And as you can see, this is a very dated figure, unfortunately. He's got some flexibility there, but he does have pins there at the shoulder. His arms articulate well enough for the time, but it's just so outdated. We could do so much better these days. So that's a little bit unfortunate, but expected for a 2006 figure. Very limited movement at the head, of course. And overall, the mold just isn't great. His satchel, for example, is molded into his thigh, and it's just not a good looking Chewbacca, unfortunately. Now for comparisons, let's bring in the most recent Chewbacca we have. This is that TVC Chewbacca from the AT-ST package, which the body is just a repack from the A New Hope version, which is a repack from the Saga Vintage Collection actually, but he does have a new head sculpt. But you can see how much better the most recent version of Chewbacca looks. Alright, so let's go ahead and load up the bag with the broken parts of C-3PO. Again, it's got a little drawstring here. Just chunk that little piece in there, and then you're going to want to tighten it up a little bit and position the torso there on the top. And it's a little tricky, so I'll probably go ahead and do this off camera. Alright, so I got it, and I've loaded the bag onto Chewbacca. And it's a single drawstring you got to loop around. And I find it works best if you tuck that drawstring underneath his head sculpt. And so you can just kind of floss it under there, if you will. And I think that helps hold it there nicely. And so you can see it's kind of just hanging there, but you have to kind of do that to pull the bag up so he sits higher on Chewie's back. And now you just kind of lay that loose 3PO head in there. Again, you have to push it in to activate the electronics, but when you let go of it, it just kind of hangs there. So I really don't like that because, you know, in the movie, the head's secured on there. Chewbacca secured his head onto the body at that point. So it shouldn't just be dangling. Unfortunately, that's the best you can do unless you decide to just go ahead and super glue the head onto the body and forget any use of electronics. Now the other issue is with the weight of the C-3PO on Chewbacca, I can't get him to stand up unless you lean his body over nearly 45 degrees. It's pretty bad just to keep him balanced. You know, it's maybe 60 degrees or whatever, but it's you know, not ideal. You want him standing straight up. So I think the only solution to deal with this is to get yourself a figure stand. So I'll go grab one to see if that works. All right, so I grabbed a figure stand I have, and that did work. The peg is holding. I can stand Chewie up straight with 3PO on his back, no problem. So that worked out nicely. All right, so there he is with 3PO on his back, looking pretty good. Fairly happy with it, but I'm just not feeling this old Chewbacca. So I really think what I want to do is go ahead and get the TVC version of Chewie and put the bagged 3PO on him. So here is the TVC Chewie with the 3PO bag. It worked just as well, and so I like this a lot better. Now unfortunately he still has the same issues with not being able to stand up, although it's not as bad as the older Chewie. You can see there he's maybe at like 80 degrees or so. So I'll go ahead and chunk that figure stand on him as well, and that should do the trick, and it does. A lot happier with the newer Chewbacca wearing the C-3PO bag. So I think I will go with this, and I'll just have to find me down the line if I want to display him at the same time with a Return of the Jedi scene. Alright, so here is my carbon freezing set with the characters I have so far. I've got some more Stormtroopers pre-ordered on the way, but this Chewbacca with 3PO will do nicely for now. And of course, I still need some Ugnaughts. There's at least 2 Ugnaughts from this scene that I need. Both remain the Legacy Collection, and both are pretty expensive on the aftermarket. I'm kind of biding my time, waiting for the right deal, but it would really be nice if Hasbro would go ahead and give us a new TVC Ugnaught. Alright, so that's going to do it for this episode of Brett on Fett. Let me know in the comments what you think about the pack-in figures for vehicles. How would you prefer Hasbro handle that situation? And what do you think is best for the line? Thanks for checking out this video. Thank you so much to my subscribers. Don't forget you can also follow me on Instagram and on X. Take care, and we'll see you next time.